Hello, everyone, and welcome to the NeuroCast. I am your wonderful host, Ryan from Arcade Nova, and I will be introducing my wonderful other people. Let's start with Kyrie.
I'm Kyrie. You may notice a drop in my microphone quality because my mic broke. Fuck technology. God damn it.
Friggin'.
I am Sam. Sam I am. Would you like green eggs and ham?
All right.
J Ness.
This neurotype chart makes the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland look so small. I'm trying for a cool metaphor, but yeah, I'm hyped for this episode. Or mini episode, as we call it.
I don't know if do you want me to go by your username?
No, just call me Martin. Yeah.
Just news.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm Martin. Charts are cool, I guess. I've always liked little personality quiz stuff, so this is kind of interesting to me.
And then we've got good old Alex.
I don't get it. I am the bad guy. Neurotypes are fake, actually, and you can fight me to change my mind.
And
just kidding.
WarMagic.
It's kind of cool, but
Yeah. Thumbs up.
Neurotypes are kind of like film theory for us crazy anime fans.
More like autisms.
It's just trying to look at the world. I have some interesting stuff to say about it.
Can't wait.
All right, so we are here to discuss this good old neurotype chart brought to us by Raw Science.
And
this
Digi. The
This
best
is
guy on the
canonically
internet.
the way that we are going to describe our brands. So I figure we could sort of each go individually and try and place ourselves, but it seems like some of you guys don't have full you don't believe that you have a full understanding of the chart and its and your placement within it. So I figure, does anyone want to place themselves first?
Yeah, I'm trying to look up where where I put myself.
I mean, since the both of us do have the best knowledge of it, we could go first to give an idea, though.
All right, sure. So I have my thing here. Do we all have prepared little images or not? If not, I don't. It's cool, but
No, I didn't.
We can edit them in later.
Get one.
Besides,
Yeah,
the one in
we
the
could
chat.
take care of that.
all right, word. Let me find my thing again real quick. I guess I wasn't so prepared either.
Don't you remember? Come on.
No,
So
I
while you're
know where
finding
I'm
that-
at, but I don't know where the image is. Oh yeah, go ahead.
While you're finding that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, Janess, Kyrie, and Martin are prepared to place themselves on this chart, and the rest of us are kind of So if you four want to go ahead and do that first, I think that'd be good. Yeah. Let's do that.
Kyrie, feel free to just take a stab.
I still have this thing, but the images are kind of small. I never fixed it. I just worked. I did it one day, or then a second day, and then I stopped touching this thing. But
All right. Well, for me personally, I feel like I pretty heavily straddle the line between analyst and fascinator, which are the two most lateral, but not on either the lexical or impressionist side of the chart. And I say that because the more you talk to me, you'll see I'm just all over the place. It's shit. I'm just thinking about shit all the time. It's to my own detriment of my productivity and my will to live, and it's terrible. So I put myself all the way at the top there because it's been like that ever since I was a kid. It's never stopped, and I hate it. And sometimes I love it. But as far as the impressionistic versus lexical side, I think there's big elements of both. I try to tend to describe things in a structured manner so that I can understand them and point at them and do things. This is how I deal with my issues, is that I intellectualize them and I turn them into forms so that I can play around with them. But at the same time, language is a meme. Words don't mean anything. Ideas are moot. Well, we have beetles in boxes, and we don't know what they look like except for our own, and you can never truly connect with another person. And so we need to transcend language and become psychics, and telepathy needs to be real. And I think I tend towards more that side, and my need to lexicalize things is just so that I can explain myself to other people better, and also so that I can like kind of get a grasp on the things in my head better. But things always start for me as an impression. I always get like a little tingly feeling in the back of my brain, and I go, "Ooh, that's an interesting idea. Can I describe this? Probably not, but I'll try anyways."
So that sort of leans in on one of the problems that people have like started to realize is a thing with the chart, and that's that like nobody is necessarily like stuck to one piece.
Are we gonna talk about heat maps?
We are guiding this into heat maps.
I haven't
Nice,
put up
nice,
the heat
nice.
maps yet.
I haven't come up with my heat map, but it's an interesting idea.
Yeah, I also have not come up with my heat map yet, but I guess I could. Did you have any other points to say about yourself for the time being?
No, I mean there's some other stuff, but we'll get into it as we discuss our types more. But that's like kind of my explanation for why I feel like I'm probably like all the way up at the top, and then maybe 2 squares to the right. Fascinator.
All right, cool.
Cool. Well,
Life
so
is fascinating.
I
think-
found me
you found yourself.
represented in aesthetic grid form. So here's me. I'm about there. I don't know words, which is why I like this chart because if I don't know if you understand. I don't know. See, I don't know if this is enough data for you.
Wait, what are you?
So,
What
like,
are we
be-
looking at?
Oh, I sent my chart in the.
In the
recording chat.
Yeah,
Recording
we'll
chat down
have
the
that
bottom.
show up on the video.
Yeah, so anyway, I'm bad at words. So I have things in my brain that, like, don't translate to words. Or at least I don't know how to translate them to words. So I might try, but most of the time that I try, I just, like, don't... Like, I'm trying to say words right now, and it's not working. So my brain is, like... I skip words. Here's the thing. This is the part that like is bad because I can't explain it. But my brain works in like Digi describes it. Like Digi describes the lateral brain, and I'm fairly lateral, though I feel as if like I have a hard time keeping up with my thoughts. I don't know if like high lateral level necessarily means that you're capable of like controlling all of your thoughts at once. But for me, like I'll have a lot of things going on in my mind, but they're all like fuzzy. Like I tend to like sort of lean in on one at a time, and then I like trip myself and be like, oh yeah, there was that other thing. Like if I'm like, I don't know, sometimes I'll like play a game while also listening to a podcast. I can generally speaking like interpret both at the same time, but I'm generally gonna be leaning into one more or the other. Though
Kind of focused on one more.
Sort of, but I do have the capability of like I'm listening to a podcast right now and I can currently relate it to the things that I'm doing in this video game, or like I listen to like a lot of video game podcasts. So like I'll be relating their experiences to a game to my experiences, usually a different game because I don't like to usually play the same game as like what I'm listening to someone talk about. But I can relate those things and like think of them as one. And also I think of myself like in a very aesthetic like way. Like I think of myself as like I'm floating in this bubble in which I am listening to like, yes, this is me. I am floating in this space in which I am watching or I'm playing this game while listening to this podcast. And that's like what I think of myself as. Like I don't know, that sounds dumb.
No,
But
that makes sense.
No,
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I think that's useful.
Also,
Yeah.
like the first thing that like cemented your identity was like you are the cluster goth shoegaze guy.
Yeah,
Very
he was
aesthetic.
pointed out by Digi.
Also,
Yeah.
I think it should be important to clarify. I think that like lateral thinking doesn't. At least I don't think it has a lot to do with like being able to multitask, because that's like a human limitation in general, as much
Sure.
as it is just like how divergent your thoughts are.
Yeah, that's
So,
that's
like,
one of my
so-
discrepancies when I watched Digi's video. He was like talking about driving, and I'm like, that's like something that can be easily measured
yeah,
and has nothing
I
to
had
do.
the same complaint with that video.
There's like nothing to do with how you think. It's like that's
Yeah.
totally measurable, normal. Like that's actually been psychologically measured, like trying to multitask, and that's doesn't differ between people. You're just worse at doing things if you try to do them at the same time.
Yeah.
So the way I interpreted like the whole lateral linear sort of thinking was like how tangential your thoughts are and how often they're like you see one thing and you see how it relates to something else and then see the connections between them. And you can't just like see something in its own context. You always have to like interpret it in the context of everything else that you've sort of encountered.
Exactly. Like, as an extremely lateral person, my entire day is just the inability to focus on any one thing at all. Like, for example, I'm currently looking at this ski sock on my desk that I was using as a microphone pop. And I'm just thinking about, like, this other time that, like, I went to see my friend up in the summer at, like, the ski mountain and, like, how there, like, were bugs there, but there's also, like, free weed. But then this also relates to this other time that I went to, like, and just, like, it never fucking stops. Yeah, continue.
I have a lot of trouble differentiating. This is probably something we'll get more into after everyone places themselves that cares to, but differentiating between being a lateral thinker and just having trouble focusing. Like, I think it may be possible to be a very linear thinker who is
Yeah, I think so too.
mobile phone pilled, and now you just have ADD, and it's hard for me to tell the difference.
So I think there's a fundamental, like one of the fundamental things about this chart is that for both axes, both linear and lateral, and lexical and impressionist, there's a difference between how you take in knowledge and how you want to format that knowledge to be shared.
Right.
Like if you're thinking about driving, you can like train yourself to take in a bunch of input laterally, but that's not necessarily how like your brain like expresses things. So like I feel like almost there should be like 2 points for each person on this chart, like one for like how you interpret data and one for how you like want to you end up expressing it or like formatting it for your own brain.
Yeah, that's
why I think.
good point.
I mean, I don't know if that's something that like is very readable. Like I feel like the heat maps thing works pretty well, and it doesn't differentiate between like your inner thoughts and like your expression or whatever, but it's visual and that works for me anyway. So
Yeah. Well, it's just that a lot of the descriptors, like for each of these axes, are like they flip flop between the way you interpret data and also the way you express data.
Yeah, I think this
So, like-
was this was something that like Alex I think had an issue with in the beginning. We were talking about in the Discord, like what's the difference between kind of like the way that you're actually thinking and structuring data and like the way that you might try to approach it because it's like a shortcoming of yours. So like more impressionistic people might want or like enjoy more lexical things because it puts things into words that they can't do.
that's yeah. Like Digi describes like he said that like his audience is assumed to be like within the like that sort of area in this
hard agree
esthetician,
personally, but
Yeah.
and that is literally me. Like I like Digi because I watch his like he describes things in ways that my brain understands, but like I wouldn't myself word it the way that he does, or even be able to at all. So like with many things. So like just hearing him say stuff is like good.
That's an interesting observation.
I do agree. I think like see this is where it comes like I'm not like fast enough at formulating words to like describe thoughts. So that's I'll get into that later probably. But
yeah,
okay,
there's a lot of things people just touched on that I want to get into
but
later.
let's finish up with like people
Yeah.
placing themselves on the chart.
Yep, so I assume I'm the last one who actually did know whose position is on the chart. So, as for me, I've debated myself for first couple days. I used to be, like, way in the expeditions sector here, but I have to But I was thinking about the whole lexical and impressionistic side because I realized, well, I am more suited to an interpretation of images rather than words. I do, my mind works more like an analyst, but with a fascinator tinge. So that's kind of why I place myself up here for now. And it's not like I don't think it's gonna be my permanent position. It's just where I see myself right now. And if I found out through other people, or for me to spend a whole day just consuming NeuroChart stuff and really self-analyzing myself, I would be more than happy to change my position if I discover, the way I think and the way I interpret things are actually in a whole lot of different position on the chart, then I would happily change it. But this is just more for how I think about myself, because I do like using. Well, at least I discovered myself that I'm more suited to interpreting images than words, because I'm trying to improve my writing, but I have a harder time of pointing the words exactly how I want to write them. But I have a better idea of thinking them in images. But the fact that I analyze a lot, so that's just my compromise. Just put it up there in terms of an analyst and fascinator, but have it more of a fascinator edge because of the slight preference over to the impressionistic side rather than the lexical side.
Yeah, pretty much same. I think a common fascinator / impressionistic experience for me is just rewriting the same sentence over and over again, because it just doesn't sound quite right, and I can never get it quite there.
That sounds very lexical to me.
Yeah,
that sounds extremely lexical to me.
My approach
that's where I don't get this.
See, that's funny because I feel the same way, but with images. I'll make a thing in Photoshop or whatever, or for a video or something, and I will try different placements of the little things. I'll make the same thumbnail 5 times, and I will never be able to decide, because I have one that I'm ooh yeah, this one looks cooler, but this one will probably grab more eyes. So which one do I? And that's a more specific example, because that's I have to cater to. But even just for my own tastes, I'm very
setting a background or something.
Yeah.
I feel that just there's going and there's a million images, but then nothing is what you want. But I mean, I feel the same way with writing too. So I don't know if that leans in any direction. I don't know.
What I used to do with my writing is just write a first draft and then just tidy up the first draft and then just leave it there. What I'm gradually learning as I'm getting better over time is to be more patient with it and then clarify it, because not everyone who's gonna read my work is gonna have the same idea or impression that I'm gonna have. So it's a matter of just having enough patience to translate what I think in my head down to the words on the screen or on the paper. That's why I think I'm gonna be if I'm gonna tell my stories, I'd rather be doing it more in a visual form than more in an impressionistic form rather than a lexical form, because that's where I find myself naturally able to express myself.
See, I have almost the opposite urge, because so I find myself I'm able to explain stuff to myself in my head, but then when it comes to explaining other things, I usually it tends to skip over stuff that I've already explained to myself in my own words in my head.
Yep.
So, but my constant goal is to try and find enough words to describe everything in my head. So I'm not my goal is not maybe my input is impressionistic, but my goal is to explain things as lexically as possible. So that, because that's how I feel is the best way to describe things.
I operate in that sort of fashion where it's everything starts off as it's just a feeling, and then it's and you just know it's true, and then you can sort of see it happening over and over, and everything repeats it. But it's if you just tell somebody that, they're yeah, you're just making shit up, but you're not, because you can just I don't know, it's just implicit by all of the things you've observed in the world that sort of lead to suggest things. But to explain that you've seen lots of things that lead to suggest something to somebody, and then you just know that something that might suggest something, it's like, well, people are just like, well, okay, I don't know what you're saying. You can't explain all of the inputs that led to that hunch.
I think that's true of literally everyone, though. Because because everyone, I think people, of everything you know, you probably only know that you know, like 1% of the things you know. And Digi had talked about in one of the videos that and I strongly agree with this. I really think he's onto something with the idea of impressionism versus lexical thinking or that axis. It's placing yourself on this that's where it kind of breaks down for me. But I've thought about this a lot, and I firmly believe that language is an attempt to describe things in a specific way for the purpose of making them communicable. Right. But almost everything that we know, we can't articulate, and you can know things without being able to articulate them. But I don't know. I want to get into some stuff later. But Martin, had you explained your placement yet? I think you were the last one to go, or did you go? And
Yeah, I didn't go. I'm kind of close to where JNS is, maybe a little bit. I'm really not sure about how the impressionist lexical access, because I tend to over-explain things. I use a lot of words, but at the same time, everything I feel like I understand, I feel like I can't explain, and that's why I use a lot of words. So it's right,
yeah, exactly.
So it's and I am actually reasonably decent at explaining things that are explainable, but a lot of the most useful thoughts I have are not the ones that are explainable. So it's sometimes when I just try to describe something, I just end up describing what's easier to describe, and it's very clear and communicatable. But but sometimes I'm just that's just because I'm latching on a thing that can be described rather than what would be more pertinent to try to explain. And it's kind of a weird conundrum.
So you've placed yourself as a fascinator, square in the middle of the fascinator square.
Yeah.
And for context, for anyone listening to this or whatever, I have known Martin longer than anyone else here. For years now, we routinely have conversations where we try to get into the weeds of ideas, and you are extremely semantic focused. I think both of us are. That's definitely the nature of our conversations. If someone says something that is not literally true, that's not okay. And that's going to be the grounds on which the conversation is taking place. So when I saw that you had yourself to the right of center on this graph, I was like, what the fuck, why? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that is the kind of thing that's going to reveal what I don't really get about this, or kind of getting at.
No.
So why are you not lexical is the question I want to pose.
It's because of where the ideas come from, and then I just try to be very precise in explaining them because of fear of misinterpretation. Because I can confidently engage with okay, all this stuff going together, but now I have to communicate it. But if I just communicate all the stuff going together, the person's not going to see it through the lens that I saw all the stuff going to, say, if I just feed the other people the data that I saw to get my interpretation, then they will come to a different conclusion. But when I'm trying to communicate my interpretation of what I saw. And so that requires extremely high precision. Otherwise, you're just the other person is not seeing what you see. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean,
I see that as the purpose of language, but I don't know if I see that as a way to sort of personality type people. Because the way to interpret this that makes the most sense to me, that seems to break down the more I listen to the people talk about this, is I would think lexical means you are lexical insofar as you're concerned about semantics, insofar as you give a shit about getting things semantically right, that you're willing to nitpick about meanings and make sure that words are specific. That's what I would think lexical would be. But people are telling me you can be impressionist and care a lot about communicating right because you struggle with it, and you can be impressionist and not give a shit about communicating right because it's either too difficult or you're just not interested in it.
Right.
So if you can be impressionist and be both of those things, then how can you be lexical?
But Mencken's more semantics. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say, well, first of all, I was gonna say, like, I don't know Martin that well, so I can't like neurotype him himself. But I do kind of the same thing when I get into the weeds for the same reason, which is like when you use a word or a phrase or a term, like if you're talking to me, you will hear me at some point say, define X. Like, what do you actually mean by that,
I do that
when you
too.
say that?
That's a good voice.
And so that way, when I use this word, I know exactly the way in which you're using it, so then I can try to translate my impression to you. And the other thing you said about, I don't think being lexical is about giving a shit about semantics, because, like, giving a shit about something or not is not so much a product of the way that your brain processes information, which is what neurotyping is supposed to be about, but rather, like, the way that you choose to interact with your environment based on that neurotype. And so I feel like lexicality, or at least the way that I understand it, is more about not being able to understand something unless it is in clear terms. So, like, whereas an impressionistic person may have an easier time of just understanding the base impression and not being able to describe it, the lexical person is instead not really able to fully grasp the shape of the impression until they can define it in clear terms. And that's like how they go about living their life, is like trying to draw boundaries around things so that they can do mathematics, or like not actual math, but like do transformations on it and interact with it and stuff like that.
How do you feel about this statement? Lexical thinkers prefer to communicate with language. Impressionistic thinkers prefer to communicate with art. Accurate? Maybe.
If that were, then I would
Maybe
interpret
accurate,
myself
but
totally
I don't know
differently.
if that-
I think it's a
I
little
disagree.
bit reductive to say that, but in general, maybe.
If that were the definition, then I would be entirely lexical. I'd be like human calculator. If that were
Yeah, same. Because, like,
That's where I thought you would be.
like that's the thing. But like,
I mean,
WarMagic's his or Christian,
Yeah.
whatever he goes by, his difference between like communicate, like like output versus input, that would clear this up, where I'd be like very high lexical output, most slightly more impressionistic input sort of idea.
That's the way that I feel about it too.
If you were to flip it, it would be: if you're impressionist, you more easily understand a concept by looking at an image. Well, okay, this is almost unfair because images are inherently more descriptive than words. But let's say if you have like a page of words and an image, which one like helps you internalize the concepts more? That would be like the like input definition of it.
I don't know quite if, like, I don't think it's fair to say that impressionistic people are necessarily like artists, or more like they might be more likely to be artists perhaps, but I don't think it's like fair to say like impressionistic people are the artists, and or that like they are more like that it's an image versus words thing. Like, I'm not sure, like that there's definitely some level of predictability there, but I don't think that's exactly the axis that it lays on.
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be art, and you have a really good point there, and we should say that it's not just art. But here's a great example of, I think, impressionistic communication that is non-artistic, which is when people communicate with words, but the thing they're communicating has almost nothing to do with what they're literally saying.
Yes.
This is things like sarcasm,
Yes.
maybe flirting. I think the best example of this that I can come up with is teasing
Yes,
someone.
I agree.
If someone is teasing someone and you look at what they're literally saying, it's something very rude. If they literally meant what they said and that was just the point, it would have a totally different meaning. But what you're communicating when you tease someone is, hey, we have a repertoire built up between us that I can say something rude to you, and the fact that I would say that, and we both know that I don't mean it, is like an endearing thing. And I think this is most of the way people communicate in normal situations, maybe the way low-level or non-autistic people in Digi's definition, Digi's whole autism thing, they tend to communicate where a lot in that sphere, where what I'm communicating is not what I'm literally saying. And so it could be the case that you could be impressionistic, very good at communicating with words, with language, but I think of Munchie when I say this, but the point of what you're communicating is not the literal meaning of your words. And that should get lumped in with the word art in what we were saying about impressionism earlier, I think.
You just reminded me of just like a little thing, but I notice a lot that like when Munchie tries to describe something and then somebody immediately takes it into a different context or says something that he didn't want to mean, he just goes, no, 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 and he like tries to redefine it.
That's me. That's like, I think that's a pretty relatable experience.
So the way that I look at it is that, like, I never even really considered the output as much as the input. Like, the way that I place myself on this chart is, so, like, the aesthetic thing, whatever, that's, like, literally my brain. Like, I don't use words to think most of the time. Like, I don't know if, like people, like, think with words, like, think with, like, train of thought, which I do that, but my brain, like, skips a lot of words, and it just has, like, these, like, vague, bubbly ideas of, like, I don't have to define something. I can just think of something, and I can just, like, think of, like, this fuzzy image. And even if it's not, like, entirely defined, it's like this nebulous idea that is, like, really not, it's not, like, one thing. It just is an idea. But the problem is then I try to translate it to paper, and it doesn't exist in the same format as my brain, because, like, the thing in my brain literally, like, it wasn't like a single segmented piece. It was like, it's this, like, weird chaotic mess.
Yeah, no, I get that. I feel like I think pretty, like, evenly divided between actual words, images or scenes, and then, like, things happening to me or, like, situations. And then the latter two don't include words.
Yeah, I firmly believe, I kind of touched on this earlier, I firmly believe that you can know things without being able to define or articulate them. So I get what Ryan's saying in that respect. And what you said about, do you think in words, I think that's useful for understanding lexical versus impressionistic. I think for sure language is, like, it's like a line approaching an asymptote, you know? It's like you can always add more language and get more specific, but language is an abstraction, so it will never map like one-to-one onto reality or ideas, but you can get it good enough for certain things.
Like,
Yep, you're not going to be able to articulate everything that you have in your head, but at least you can at least know, like, what you want to talk about. Like, especially if you're, like, really interested in something, then you would invest all your time in articulating that one particular subject.
That's sort of a problem that I have, is that most of the time I don't even, like, try to articulate ahead of time, or, like, I just let myself fucking free. I just run with it.
Yeah. There are a lot, like,
free balling.
Yeah, it's a lot of the time, like, especially when it comes to, this is why I find social interaction so tiring a lot of the time, is that it's constantly having to, like, reorganize and restructure the way that I think about things to try and, like, present it to somebody else in a way that they might understand. And so, like, when I'm alone, I can just, like, babble nonsense and just, like, move my body around, or, like, around in a way that if somebody saw me, they'd be like, what the fuck? This fucking crazy autist person. And I can be kind of like that with my friends, but I still have to, like, have some semblance of communicability there.
Right.
In general. I don't know. There's a point I was going to make there, but then I just talked about how I ramble and stuff.
Well, that's how I feel like doing this podcast, for example, is like I feel like strapped in, like I'm supposed to, like, try and talk, but then I'm just like, well, no, don't do that. I don't know.
Have you had the experience? This is to Kyrie. What do you go by? Is your name's Cricket in the
Kyrie.
chat?
No,
Okay,
it's not. Don't know.
So it's have you had the experience where you like sometimes you'll like start explaining something in like a million words, it's in crazy detail, and then the other person's like, yeah, that's like a basic thing, everyone knows that. But then the other time you do it, people will be like, oh wow, that's really insightful. But you can't tell like what's basic and everybody knows, and what's just like a normal thing that like what's actually is insightful. That's something I have where it's like sometimes I can't tell the difference, but there's like a mix, and it's like, so like I can't tell what's like everybody already knows, and it's and then like
that.
I have a thought.
I'll let you. But it doesn't get me. That doesn't strike like so much a chord with me that I'm like, yeah, that happens to me all the time. But I think I do know what you're talking about, and the way that I related to that was that like when it comes to the way that ideas relate to each other, there are a lot of situations where there is a seemingly simple idea, but because of its simplicity, it can interweave and have different effects and causes on various different things. So it goes a lot deeper and is a lot more significant than at first it may seem. And so like when you describe this base principle, people might be like, oh yeah, of course it's like that. But you're like, no, like I'm trying to explain how much bigger this is. And I don't think you're seeing that versus
I know that one exactly, where it's like, no, you don't see that because I'm explaining this implies like 1,000 things that it relates to the other thing I was saying that you weren't understing.
Yeah.
And it's like,
and they're like, why are you bringing this up? This is completely unrelated. I'm like, no.
Like if you see this, then you should also see that it leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to this, and therefore, like, why don't you realize that sort of pattern is another one? But the one I was talking about is a little different, but I definitely relate to that one.
Let me take a stab at that first one. So if I understand the first thing that Martin was trying to say, I think this is like you're talking to someone, you're like fascinated with an idea, you're really in the details, you think you're onto something kind of like big and non-trivial. And you try to explain it to someone, and sometimes they're like, yeah, everybody knows that, whatever. And sometimes they're like, oh man, you're blowing my mind with all these details. I never thought about it that way. I think this is, it's not like there's a real thing that's the same for people that you're not attuned to. I think what's going on there is more like this. Most of the time we go about our lives, we go throughout our days just kind of, I don't want to say going through the motions, but you take almost everything for granted. And then other times you get into mind states, and I'm going to sound like a real hippie LSD spiritual guy because drugs kind of awaken the kind of things that I'm thinking of here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be related to drugs. Like I'm looking out my window right now just for an example, and there's grass out there. And almost all the time I go through my life, I don't care about grass. It's grass. Everyone knows grass. You don't need to think about grass. But you can also think about grass, and you can have your mind blown with like, dude, how could a plant like grow out of the ground, and like where did it come from? And if you get in that mood to like just to wonder about things, then you can find things interesting and fascinating, more depending on how you care to think about it in the moment. But most of the time that's just not worth doing. So I think what you're having is sometimes you come to someone and you say, oh man, think about all the underlying details that we take for granted about this thing we interact with all the time. And they say, who cares? I don't need to think about that. But other times you might say the right thing, or they might be in the right mood to be like, wow, man, if you really think about it, but I don't think and you can tell me if I'm totally off base with what you thought, but I don't think that's like a real thing that you can't tell whether or not people know or not. It just depends on if they care to engage.
That's where I was coming from too, where it wasn't so much a stance of like, you're saying like the difference isn't that they do or don't understand something. It's rather of like the position of where, that you're coming from. I completely had word salad there. Hold on. Go ahead. I'll reformat that.
So
yeah, I think I understand.
It seems like one of the fundamental like things about the human brain is that like a lot of social phenomenon are like the the human brain always tries to simplify information, simplify things, because if we were always in this like contemplative, like exact, like a lot of input at the same time mood, then like we wouldn't be able to do anything. We'd be almost paralyzed to do anything. So like when it comes to a lot of like studies about like social relations and stuff like that, you get like you can only have like a couple of like streamlined relationship. I think there was like a study about like Facebook friends, like how many, like you can have a bajillion Facebook friends, but doesn't necessarily mean you can actually have that much input from that many social connections.
Is that the
What's his name? Was it
what's it,
Dunbar's
the-
number?
250
Dunbar?
people thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard
You
it was
can
like
only remember
100,
250 people.
100 or something. Yeah, I've heard
And
something
then-
along those lines.
The basis for a lot of like social bias and stuff, it comes from like the idea that you can't like always consider like the whole idea of like racism in general is that it's you're undercutting, like instead of like trying to judge each one individually, you're like kind of grouping things into easily understandable like bites of groups of people. That's why like you even get like this whole form of communication. Like if I were to say, oh yes, I am an impressionistic thinker, you don't like that immediately comes to mind a bunch of different things, and that's the kind of useful thing about this chart.
Yeah,
Is that it's useful for communication.
It's
in
a
that way.
self-analytical tool.
But
I mean, I think within the chart, like, you know, it's not a 1-to-1. Like that's why I feel like the explanation portion of this is kind of useful, because like it's not exactly, you're not just gonna look at the chart and be like, ah, yes. At least I don't.
Yep.
Yeah.
Me too.
So back with the thing we were talking about, is that related to like lateral or linear? Like whether people want to engage with some like stupid music?
I don't think it's related to anything on this chart. Or it might be the case that depending on your placement on your chart, you might be more likely to do that more often or something. But I think it's just whether or not the person cared right then. You know, sometimes you feel like thinking about things in a certain way, and sometimes you just
that's more of
don't.
like a
That's
more
what
like
I
a
thought.
base
Yeah.
cringe, smooth galaxy brain kind of.
Oh, the
The
true
true
chart. Virgin Chad, base cringe, smooth wrinkle.
So that's
Martin, do you think
cringe,
I was on
smooth
base
brain?
when I...
Every
the
music
cringe,
I-
smooth brain virgin.
Cringe. Everything I think is cringe, smooth brain version. Yeah.
I'm a hard cringe neutral on that. But okay, how about this? I have another thing with neurotyping in general. So in the beginning of the first video,
Oh, the Myers-Briggs
Digi-
thing?
yeah, MBTI, Myers-Briggs takes it in the ass. Type inventory rather. So Digi said, I got a bone to pick with Myers-Briggs, blah blah blah. Personality changes pending situation. So instead of defining personality, I'm going to define the way people think. But I'm in the weeds of the neurotypes, and I'm like, the way I think about things is not fixed. It has the same problem that he was describing with MBTI, where it's different types of experiences, different situations, I'll apply different ways of thinking to. I'll dance around the chart, and it'll be more useful to be over here or over there, depending on what experience I'm having and how I'm trying to interface with it. Thoughts on that? Can you speak to
I
it?
think what you're talking about is... So I think I don't think everyone's clear on this whole heat map thing. But in the Pantsu Party Discord, as part of the Cotcast thing, I'm not sure if it was Carla or somebody came up with this idea.
I think it was Carl.
Yeah, of heat
Yeah, I
maps.
think it's her.
Yeah. And so Carla's whole point was like she notices that in different situations she seems to act as if she is in different places on the chart. So like when she's in like more I can't remember if this is exactly what she said, but just for example, like when she's in more like social or direct situations where she has to be someone that's more lexical and less lateral, she is able to act like that. But like on her own, just in the way that she acts, she'd be more in like the overseer fascinator place. And so she like developed this idea of a heat map where like there is some central location where you tend to be around, and then there are these branching out spots where in varying situations, in like less and less less and less frequent occurrence, you can like exhibit characteristics of these different neurotypes.
I like the one. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I've
been talking too much.
I was gonna say I like the one. I think Ash Vampire sent his, and it was like it looked like a meteor, but the way that he did it, it was like it gets smaller on the one end, and then it's like bigger on the main end, so you can sort of see where, like, you can see the prominence. Whereas like this was from Digi's Twitter. I don't know if this is his thing or if this is like from somewhere else, but that looks a little like much to me.
I don't know. Is it possible that somebody could have a heat map of the entirety of the neurotyping chart? I don't know. Maybe.
That's what I'm saying. Can you have the whole chart and you have like multiple red peaks? Could you have that? Could I have a red peak in Human Calculator and in Clearsighted? Or does that just break neurotyping? Is that just wrong?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think the case might be out on
it's
this.
Not a
one.
perfect system, I guess.
Digi will have to make another video explaining heat maps.
Yes. Please, we need Digi's expert guidance.
Yeah.
If the initial goal of the chart, the neurotyping chart, was to like supersede the Myers-Briggs chart, I think it has ultimately failed, because just like the Myers-Briggs test, like you can take that test and it's not. And again, there can be a spectrum of like, your Myers-Briggs test results can change depending on when you take it or how you're feeling when you take it. Just how. So if the goal was to have like a more definitive chart, then maybe. If anything, this neurotyping thing is a parallel exercise that explores different types of like introspection than necessarily the Myers-Briggs.
And I think
the real value is like just having
it's...
conversations about it. That's the value. It's not putting yourself on the chart.
I think the ideas are much more useful than the idea that you can place yourself.
I think
it's impossible to be truly solidified.
Yeah. This is also like tending towards. I feel like the conversation is tending towards like how much can you actually explain with so many axes. Like we only have 2 degrees of dimensionality here, and we're trying to like explain how complicated the human brain is. And then like another vague or like point that I was going to make, which I think like the heat mapping thing is cool, but it may be that like the neurotyping, there still is like a true base neurotype that you have that is your nature, but then your heat map just describes how you are capable of acting in certain situations, but it's not like your true base type.
So here's the thing with what I was saying when heat maps got brought up, the idea that you can utilize different categories on this chart to deal with different experiences, situations. There's a line, I took a little bit of notes from videos when I was going through them this morning. So I actually have, this is after 7 minutes, probably around the 8-minute mark on the lexical versus impressionistic thinking follow-up video Digi made. And somewhere around there, you will find a quote where he says something along the lines of, there are people who see having art explained as reducing it or taking away from it. And this was, this is a good example of what I was saying before, because there are some things that I experience, art would be, if you think art, you're in the right ballpark, where I'm like, I know I enjoy this thing. I know I'm like enjoying this thing on an impressionistic level, and I don't need to analyze it. I don't need to articulate it. And I actually know that doing it will make it worse for me. So when I identify that, I can be like, well, I'm going to hang out over here on the right side of the chart because that's more useful now. Or again, in social situations, we mentioned with teasing, maybe you don't need to be as semantically focused, which I guess would be lexical. So I don't know. I just have this idea that you can bounce around. You can use the different squares on the chart almost as tools. Yeah. And maybe your heat map shows which tools you're better or more inclined at using. I guess that's a good way to.
And like I will
what's
say
being
that
linear like?
No, go ahead.
What is that? What is it like to use linear? What would that be?
Say again.
To focus in on one thing.
Yeah.
Well, I have a big problem with is your ability to focus on one thing a linear lateral?
Yeah.
Because I don't think it should
I don't
be.
think
it seems
it
like
really
it shouldn't be.
is. I
Because I
think
can definitely
is-
focus.
I
That's
think
just discipline.
I think focus is separate. Lateral thinkers may, in general, have a harder time focusing, but it's not about focus. I don't think.
This to me, this seems like another case of input output where, like, I almost like my initial interpretation would like this is coming from like the if Trump was like a pure instinct person, that it's like the reason you get that impression is because when he speaks he talks about one thing at a time, and like but like a lot of other like even like Digibur's videos, he has the ability to thread multiple subjects in the one like narrative in the one.
Trump does little mini tangents all the time, though. They're very simple,
but
but
he gets stuck. But he's still only talking about like one. When he's talking about something, he's only talking about that thing. And I feel like that's like what linear is, but I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if I agree with you on that. But I don't. I would need like a clip of Trump talking to hash this out.
I can't
I'm not
really
gonna pull that
neurotype.
up
It's
right
impossible to like. Maybe it's impossible to literally have one thing, but like for the most part.
No, but he'll like say like
Like-
immigrants commit crimes, and then he'll like find it. He'll bring up the person that had their like house robbed by an immigrant, and then he'll say, "Here's this person," and
Well, that's why he's impressionist, because he keeps.
But he will
around.
literally like contradict himself and bounce back and forth. He'll be like, "Well, you know, I'm gonna totally make some shit up, and hopefully we can do this without getting political." But he might say something like, "Well, you know, immigrants are bad, and they're real bad. Well, some of them are actually good. You know, some of them are actually great. Some of them are the greatest people we've had in this country. But actually, they're mostly bad, and that's why blah 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 blah." He does stuff like
No, he
that
definitely
all the
does that.
time.
That's
Like he
actually-
will go
definitely
off on a
does that,
quick
yeah.
tangent where he contradicts himself like constantly. That seems kind of lateral to me.
Well, okay. Contradicting
Ow.
yourself, isn't that like a? Does that mean you're not thinking about multiple things at the same time, which is why you contradict yourself? Like if you were
Maybe,
thinking
maybe.
Well,
about
it's not
two
necessarily a
things-
contradiction. It could
Well-
be just different things, but he seems like he bounces around a lot. I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
No, I think
Mm.
contradiction.
not that kind of model.
What? Wait, what kind of model?
No, he was talking about like the health report models, and he's like, I don't really know much about models. Well, not that type of model. No, and it was like an emergency meeting, and he said that. I'm like, well, did he really just do that? Like,
weird flex, but okay.
yeah,
Weird
yes, it was.
flex.
It was like the weird flex, like during like the start of the pandemic, like what you really just did that in like national meeting.
I think that is a linear, like, trait because, like, or I don't know, like that seems like his mind went to that immediately, and he didn't even consider like the other. Thing.
No, he knew the other one. He was just like, well, I'm not used to models, but then he thought, oh, let's make a joke.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like,
I can kind of see that as linear. It's like going from point A to point B, and he just immediately reacts to whatever the first thought that came next in the sequence was.
But how is that
sorta.
different? Well, then what's if you're lateral? Like, then what is lateral? Because that's also like point A, then you point B that's somewhat related that connects them. Like that's also the same. I don't know what's the. That's
I guess it's the difference between like a straight line and sort of like a web.
Yeah, I think we're also
Yeah.
like getting lost in
Every
like, the
point
difference-
connects to 6 other
the
points.
difference between like the way that you actually think versus the way that you are expressing in your actual output.
Here's an idea that I want to see how people feel about how this relates to lateral versus linear. Let's say you're trying to learn how to do something. Let's say it's playing the piano.
Okay.
And you're a beginner, and so you're starting out, and you're like, okay, how can I learn to play this song well and be good at piano in general? And you kind of I think this is a lateral thing, is where I'm going with this, but it kind of occurs to you that there's 2 different strategies you can take. You can very meticulously and very slowly focus on playing the notes in a certain part correctly, and do this tiny part over and over very repetitively, mechanically, and try to gradually speed it up until it becomes second nature. That's one strategy. You also notice there's another strategy, which is like you get the song playing in your head and you kind of try to feel it, and you're not really doing this mechanical, repetitive, broken down practice routine, but you're like, okay, I can kind of like feel the song at a more relaxed, less intentional level. And sometimes when I do that, I have a breakthrough, and it breaks a mental block and it helps me get part of it. And you notice that you can switch between those two strategies. As you get burnt out on one, you can switch to the other and like utilize them at different parts of learning a song. Do you think that's a lateral thinking thing? Do you think that idea I described has anything to do with the lateral linear axis?
Yes, I do think that would be lateral.
I don't think it has anything to do with either.
Because don't you have to practice like and speed up by repetition? However you're thinking about it, eventually you do have. I mean, there's muscle memory. You just have to develop by repetition.
When you started to say that, go ahead.
If we're gonna approach this, we have to assume that dexterity is off the table.
Okay.
That we're not like that. We're
Yeah.
not considering
Assume you have
physical-
average or decent dexterity.
Yeah.
It's not a problem.
Again, this is another thing. Well, this is a learning situation. This is not outputting information. So this is not you thinking on the fly. This is you learning on the fly, which is.
Does it need to be?
What's the difference between thinking and learning?
It's like the ability to digest things instead of like digest new inputs instead of digesting old inputs.
Because to me, like the difference here is like there might be some relation on. I mean, this also seemed initially like a lexical versus impressionistic thing, but it's like maybe which one you prefer or the one that is easier for you to. I mean, isn't that just what exactly you're saying? Or like the one that is easier for you to like use maybe has something to do with it, but as far as like which one you would choose to do, which I don't fucking know. I forget what I was saying.
Oh, I like what you said a second ago when you said it can be a lexical versus impressionistic thing. Definitely. It sounds like strategy 1 is lexical. It sounds like strategy 2 is impressionist.
Yeah.
And I guess the thought I was having that it was that your ability to switch between them or not would be a lateral linear thing, which maybe it's not. It sounds like you don't think so. And I didn't realize that until after what you said.
I'm not sure. Who knows?
I was gonna say, on that note, what I thought you were going to say is, or at least like a similar interpretation of that example is like, when playing piano, you initially learn to play with one, like you initially learn to play with one hand, and then you gradually begin to use two hands, and then on top of that you might add like vocals. So is that like a lateral thing? Like does the easiness of that come, if you're a lateral person, does that come easier, do you think? Or is that just like something
I wouldn't think so. Like I'm still hard against this idea that like multitasking or ease of multitasking has a lot to do with lateral thinking. Maybe I'm wrong though.
It almost seems like a training thing. Like
yeah,
it's literally just practice trains those things. Like that's not. I don't think that's related to anything other than just practice.
Yeah, but it's meant. What I was trying to get at was different ways of practicing or different ways of thinking about how.
Yeah, I agree with like that could be a thing. But once you start talking about whether you can actually multitask or not, that's just like a physical, like a actual just human capability thing that I don't think is gated by how you think. It's just It's just limited by basic ability.
I mean, a related thing maybe is like so I'm a computer science major, and during lecture a lot of computer scientists have like a lot of students tend to have a problem internalizing the information, but then a lot of people, once they start like utilizing it in code, that's when a lot of the concepts come about.
But that's like true with anything. I feel like that's just.
But then
that's why lectures
like a hands-on versus lecture versus hands-on type thing.
Yeah, that makes.
So does that have like anything to do with but like in other creative writing or like English classes, you get like almost the opposite of like people are very good at formalizing thought like immediately from the information they get.
In regards to this, I actually think this is mostly just what you've done most of your life, and it's like a train thing. because this is like I was talking to like different cultures about different types of school, and like I've heard, like I was talking to someone who was from India, and it's like they make you like be extremely precise on remembering the exact wording of a question. So you have to write the exact words, like word for word. It's not like a general understanding. So they're like really, really, really good at like multiple choice tests, but then they like fail anything hands on. But it's not because like like innate ability or like the way they think. It's just because that's what they did their whole lives and that's what they got better at. Whereas, and I've heard Japan is also super like by the books testing. That's another thing. I haven't talked to as many. Well, I've talked to some people, but like the India person, I had a really, really long conversation about, and he was talking about how the schooling was. So I think like that difference, like whether you're good at hands-on or like better with a lecture, might literally just be related to what your background is and what you've done most of your life, more so than like your innate ability. Or I mean, maybe there might be some preferences like within the sliding scale, but if a culture is reinforcing remembering the exact wording of something, you'll probably be better at remembering the exact wording of something. In America, we tend to be more loosey-goosey, more intuitive, more hands-on, so that's one of actually there is advantages to that sort of culture in a lot of it. Like I've actually seen trade-offs between the type of people that come from those sort of differences, like the cowboy coding versus like by the books versus it's actually it's quite an interesting dichotomy. But I don't know if this is really like a personality thing more so. I mean, it might be a little bit.
This is the nature versus nurture thing, where it's like, did you start off thinking this way, or is it because you grew up in this culture?
Which goes back to what Alex was saying about being able to switch, which I certainly believe is the case. Like you can, like I honestly am. The more I learn, the more I'm coming to see like you just sort of adjust to what you're around, and you can change, and that's just that seems to be more the case. I mean, again, I guess this is an impressionistic take because I'm like just sort of I'm like, well, I've seen all these things that sort of suggest this, but it's like, and I have no like hard data or research that's backing what I'm saying, but it's like the more I see, the more it seems to suggest that like, okay, it really, really is nurture, not like what something innate. Mm-hmm. Like, especially like you can see things on like with women starting to perform more in things where like 30 years ago we thought it was like some genetic thing, but it's like clearly leveling out in a lot of areas. Like right now I'm thinking of like chess because I've been focusing like watching chess and playing chess recently, but like that's something where like the highest rated woman player like 50 years ago is terrible, but now it's like, okay, there are plenty of examples of women that are just as or almost as good as the best men. There's not as many, but that's because the vast discrepancy in how many people play and the motivations to, and it's like it's starting to level out in so many things that it's like even if there is some slight genetic thing, it's like overwhelmingly seems to be nurture.
Yeah, there's a really good book about this entire conversation called Range. Really good read. You should read it. Hey, Friggin.
Put that in the recording chat.
How you feeling, Friggin? You getting anything out of this? What's going on?
Yes, I've been kind of quiet because I've just been listening and sort of just like internalizing and meditating on all of this.
Would you be
just
able
real
to
quick,
put on the chat?
Yes, so I have some thoughts, especially with the heat map, because I've been having a hard time placing myself. Because I feel like I almost operate in like two mode. Like, vertically, I know exactly where I'm at. Maybe about like 2/3 of the way up. The trouble is, I feel sometimes like I kind of operate in two modes, either very lexical or very impressionistic, and you can shift between them, sort of like shifting gears, but it takes a minute. Like, it just kind of depends on what I'm doing at the moment. Like, if I'm alone with my own thoughts and I'm not really talking to anybody, I sort of get very impressionistic, and if all of a sudden someone's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, lose the ability to articulate outright, versus if I am talking to someone, or like, say I'm at work and I'm being given instructions, do this, do this, do this, I need it, like, explained very explicitly and specifically. Like, like, the verbiage and phrasing, and I have to be given very clear instructions.
Yeah.
And having to go back and forth between one another really quickly is sort of like jarring. So I'm just having a hard time placing myself on the x-axis.
Now my question,
if you know what I mean.
My question for you, Friggin, is that do you ever find yourself, so you have like this green line in between. Is that simply a thread connecting the two red points?
Yeah,
Or is
like I
that-
figure you can't just like hard stop from one to the other. You gotta have to sort of like move back and forth.
It looks like boobies.
Wait, how did you make
impressionistic right
this?
there.
How do you make the heat map? Are you just using paint? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I got some like paint but nicer
Okay, I'm gonna
programs for drawing stuff like the thumbnails. So I just cranked that out real quick while you guys were talking.
Man, I feel like I'm very. If I were to do something like this, it would be a little bit higher, and there'd be more color in between. But it'd be like, and also I wouldn't be as far right, but I'd be like in between Fascinator, Human Calculator, but like a big blob in between all three of those top.
So would you just give yourself one peak point?
I don't really. I wouldn't. I would say like anywhere in that range because it's like when I'm trying to explain something and I want someone to understand what I'm saying. I'm like, okay, I have to be very, 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 very precise, and I have to. But like the reason I say it, I don't care about semantic is that like I only care that the meaning I am using out of my words is what is perceived by the other person. I don't care what we decide the meaning for a word is. Like
Sure.
we can decide banana means dolphin if we want to, and then we're just saying bananas are like really intelligent animals because banana means dolphin in this context. And as
Yeah.
long as the other person I'm talking to understands that, then I don't really care about the semantics so much. I'm just concerned that my meaning is understood. And I just feel like there's a higher risk of being interpreted incorrectly through images or impressionistic communication, even though it's way more
That is very
powerful,
true.
but being precise with it is incredibly difficult. And sometimes I just want to, a fear of being misinterpreted is like, that's why I'm like,
Oh boy.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of almost like a useful tool. Like being lexical is, yeah, it may not be as accurate or as all-encompassing, but it is definitely quicker and more precise. And
necessary
sometimes that's what you
evil.
need.
I am-
Exactly.
yeah, I'd say it's like
I-
more accurate and precise, less all-encompassing. Like,
Yeah.
what you are saying exactly what you're saying, but you would like to be able to say more, and you can't say that much with words, but you can.
Yeah.
At least what you are saying is what you're saying, as long as you. But trying to do that properly with like images or art is like, well, good luck. Like everyone's going to interpret it their own way, and maybe some people are right on point with what you meant to communicate, but
Well, I don't think I think like that's kind of the point. Maybe some people want to express something very specifically, but I think a lot of those types of people want their meaning to be abstract.
Yeah, just give up on being understood completely.
Well, because one of the cool things about art is you can, or even really fairly linguistic art like a book, but if it's fiction or whatever, but you can create something that has your meaning in it, but also, you know, has other things in it, is sort of open to interpretation. I think that is one of the things that's valuable about it.
But it's rare that people
so, yeah.
try to be precise with art, which is
Well-
because it's not a good medium for being precise, I guess. Is what
Well, it depends. When it comes to paintings are very different. Like than when paintings are very dependent on like the era of painting and the era of thought that goes into how like you interpret art. I mean, this whole like when it comes to like film or art or like writing, there's been like schools of
so realism
there's
is
been,
like lexical
theorists.
as fuck or something.
Well,
Hyperrealism is just like the most lexible person in the world.
Kind of, I guess. Like,
Actually, yes.
I mean, like realism being like, I mean, the whole point of realism is that you have so much like easily to grasp indicators of reality that it's giving you a clear interpretation.
Here,
Oh, go for it.
I think we're running into an issue with the word art having a very, very broad meaning.
Oh, for
'Cause
sure.
art can mean like, it's an artistic, expression of this idea I had. So it's like not codified in language and it's loose and like you get the impression. But art can also just be like when you're very, very good at your craft, there is an art to that. So I don't know anything about painting, but I would think that like very, very realistic paintings, the goal there is to like showcase your technical skill of like, I can put a brush to a canvas and have it look like exactly like the real world. Look at how good I am mechanically at my art. But it's not so much about expressing what's the word? Not esoteric, an abstract idea maybe.
But actually, a lot of the realistic looking art tends to have the goal for the spectator is usually to think like impressionistically, or is to inspire. Like, I think Wanderlust is the romantic era of painting. Oh god, I haven't studied painting stuff. I haven't looked at any of this in a while. But like,
fake art fan.
I am a fake art fan.
fan.
I'm a super fake art fan. I'm more interested in film than painting in general. But like a lot of the like what you might like initially see as like a realistic art piece could have the goal of inciting in the viewer like a contemplative, impressionistic thought. So like,
Yeah, I wonder with the more like realistic art if they're trying to do that via the subject matter rather than the actual like the methods and the way it's painted. Like say like a Picasso, a lot of the thoughts and emotions and ideas behind that come from the art style.
It's most definitely like my throat. Hold on, I gotta fucking clear my throat.
Took the opportunity to do
Man,
this
if we had like the clip for that song and you could play it for like, that would be pretty interesting.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, the noise
that
thing.
song.
DJ Cool, let me clear my throat.
I'll note that. But anyway,
That-
think,
you know,
just
heard
think
that
about
song?
the bass god Bob Ross. Okay, this guy.
Oh yes.
He takes
Oh,
the
yeah.
brush, he goes swoosh, and he's got a fucking masterwork in your fucking face. But the real artistry of Bob Ross is not the painting itself. It's the guy recording him. Because the whole like Bob Ross, he makes nice paintings. But really what it comes down to is
The show.
Yeah, the joy of painting is the real like pow.
It's about his take on the process of creating a painting. It's not about the end result, I think. I get that.
Yeah, it's about the fact that he can just willy-nilly fucking just like he is a fucking magician with the brush, and within 20 minutes he has something that would take any other fucking person like hours.
But he encourages you to do the same. He encourages the viewers, like, oh, just take the brush to the canvas and, follow me and you'll wind up with something.
And as many Twitch streamers
I think
have
that's the art
showed,
of
it
it. Is
doesn't
like
work out.
encouraging people to take up that goal.
Have you seen the people that tried to follow along?
Yeah, they come out really decent considering those people have never painted
Yeah.
before, which I think is the idea.
Yeah.
well,
There's also the
I think
squirrels.
that's his art, is like come on guys, just check it out. You can
Yeah.
do it? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Yashike.
Yashike PBS painting
Yeah.
show, or wherever it is.
Yep, so peaceful.
Right.
Yeah, I would absolutely classify his paintings and the show
No, the
as
show is-
two separate independent pieces of art, though.
Yeah,
it's just it's ASMR
Yeah, yes.
before ASMR.
exactly. That's exactly what Bob.
Have you placed yourself yet, Cristiano or WarMagic?
I have not because I don't know.
Would you like to
where go.
expound, anyways?
Sure. Firstly, I think most of the titles for all the blocks are like pretty wild.
Cool.
And don't make sense. Like human calculator. Okay, I still don't understand why human calculator is a lateral thing.
Yes. I am so
Because-
with you there.
Because a calculator, that seems like the most linear, tool imaginable.
Well, I think the idea is that like within a brain, there's so much going on to like receive the outcome.
But there was like the radian mode.
Okay. I
Okay. Anyway, so okay, for placements, like either
Like
way,
even like human computer would be better than human calculator.
computer.
Yeah,
I guess it makes
human
sense.
4-core processor.
I just think human
Human
calculator,
multi-core
the
processor.
point being, can take in a lot of different divergent information and do some kind of like transformation or process on it. Whereas like being linear as a bookkeeper is all about like keeping things in order and, you know, like having all the ducks in a row. And that's not necessarily a calculator component.
Accounting versus economics or something. I don't know. I'm just pulling shit on that.
So generally, I'd say, I guess I'd probably be like around externalists and impressionists or somewhere around there. But then other times, I feel like I tend towards like maybe like the technicians or quick-witted zone. But so like again, this isn't.
So your heat map might be kind of like Z-shaped around the center.
Yeah, possibly.
Whoa.
But I'm not. Again, I'm not sure because I'm not. I'm trying to stay around like not to any one extreme because the more extreme, the less like clear of an idea that I can.
Yeah,
place
I have that
myself.
same problem. Yeah.
And it could change. Like I could look at this tomorrow and go like, wait a second, I don't. And when I watched his like initial like anime video, like literally like every other block, I was like, yeah, wait, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me, that's me. Like I've had relatable moments to almost every block.
For me, like originally,
I almost wonder if you have to like have someone else place you on there.
Yeah, that
Because
might
like
be
it's too easy to
better.
get inside your own head and be like, oh well, I that's what took me so long to come up with this, and even then, I
Okay,
can't
so,
pinpoint a single spot.
So do we think that the chart is input, output, or both?
I'm
Right,
still
it's
not
probably
sure.
both.
It's
Input.
probably
Neither.
both.
I need to spend more
Okay.
time thinking
I interpret
about
it more input. Was
Yeah,
my
I thought it
original
was just.
idea.
I thought it was all input. Like it's all about.
It is the means by which you map inputs to outputs, maybe.
But like
Because
Digi's
if it-
description of analyst is the ability to output clearly. So like that whole like square is like
Well,
No, it's not.
dependent on the-
You're not supposed to use the squares or the titles. It's just he put names to them, but it's really just
Yeah.
supposed to be like a gradient, and then you just.
But like when he was explaining that area, he was like, "This is like people in this zone, people around this zone can like articulate thought better." You know what I mean? Well, this comes to like the IQ.
Yeah, but
thing.
your output doesn't
too.
necessarily need to be articulate, which is where art comes in. You can have output that isn't articulate, that isn't verbal.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's where I'm at.
And also, like I think, like whereas you say the change over the time. Like as a kid, I was like super into art and making shit and like building shit with my hands and all that, and like never didn't talk a lot. And I was like would just sort of like play with my blocks, and then someone would say something, and I would say like 2 words, and it was just like, and I was just playing with my blocks.
Well, I would think it's almost certainly the case that the vast majority of people are inclined to become more lexical over time, because you don't pop out the womb knowing language, and like language and the ability to use language to organize your thoughts is something that you gain and can practice over time.
It's true.
So like even if you naturally tend towards it, it would take time to get there.
Yeah,
Which
I
I
definitely think-
perfectly agree with that.
You can probably track
Yeah.
a change in the chart over each stage of mental development as a growing person. Like
Yeah, I think.
probably you have a different placement in adolescence than you do as a college.
Yeah, I feel like I
age
remember
kid.
there was some mention of this. I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or not, but just like the idea that you start out as pure instinct and you like in general make some kind of movement towards the upper left as you go grow older.
We're all doomed to be human calculators
Oh no.
Well,
or bookkeepers.
and then I think this also has an effect on like the impression of intelligence, because generally, like in popular culture, like pure instinct thinkers could be seen as like very unintelligent because they're more
pure instinct thinkers
people
are
for sure.
MacGuffins.
they're the main characters.
I think there's a for sure a popular misconception that intelligence and linguistic ability are like somehow the same thing, and like if you're not articulate, you're not intelligent, or if you're articulate, you are intelligent. I think a lot of people think that, and I think that's hella wrong.
Yeah.
It's a very
absolutely, yeah.
Freudian philosophy of like, I don't know if anyone here has read Freud.
I haven't read
Nope.
Freud yet.
I only know in like Welcome to the NHK, the dude memes on the girl. With...
Wait, I was gone for 1 second. Did someone mention Welcome to the NHK?
Yeah, when the main
we
character
did.
memes on the girl with Freud.
We're talking about Freud. That's
Word.
the point.
It's like,
You know
So,
what I'm
like-
talking about?
Digi reminds me a lot about like this ways of thinking, because Freud is basically the same thing. He just like thought a lot about these, and he wrote some books, and everyone was like, "Oh my god, this guy's crazy for thinking like this." He didn't actually do any like scientific research to back it up.
See,
He just made it up.
So he's basically Digibro.
No, I mean, if Digi was able to articulate this in a book, then maybe.
Yeah, the credibility of ideas, it's really interesting how, because at some point everything was just something someone made
Exactly.
up. Vetting credibility is really subjective and difficult, and Freud definitely like gamed the system hard.
He was the first one, and so that's why everyone thinks he's cool, because he's the first guy to be a quote-unquote psychologist.
Psychology has that problem too, I think, a lot, where the line between just kind of, an idea and a scientifically vetted theory, there's some gray areas in psychology, I think. I have that impression.
Anyone who's
that
established in psychology hates Freud because, like, he basically
He
discredited
just said whatever the hell.
their whole, like, field of study. He's just like a madman who was writing down whatever he wanted instead of doing, like, the...
I'm gonna do cocaine and write about how people want to fuck their moms, and I'm getting rich and famous for it.
Yeah,
Go
basically.
Freud. What a legend. Man,
He
imagine
is a legend.
Freud if YouTube existed during Freud's day. Oh, man.
Patreon, out of the
It'd be
park.
so good. It'd be so good.
He'd be like, hey boys, Freud here with another story about my mom and how it affected my psychology.
Hey guys,
What's
sorry I
up,
haven't made a
everybody?
video in a while.
What's up, Freud Nation?
I can't imagine Ford speaking like that. Oh, can you imagine the internet rivalry between him and John? Oh, that would have been so awesome. All about the 12-hour podcast when they first met.
Oh.
Yeah, I would.
Wait, is
give
there like
almost
a
anything
rap
to
battle
hear
between
that.
Freud and Jung or something?
No.
Is that...
There probably
think there
is.
is.
The Rap Battles of History channel, right?
I feel like
They
that's
did.
something.
Yeah,
that
there's
exists.
been everyone and everyone else. Let me go look real quick.
So are we? Is this segment of the show? Are we getting the people who don't get this to try and place themselves? Should I try and do that?
yes.
Yeah, it is up to you.
Okay,
Alex.
so I'm not going to place myself,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you, not confidently, I'll tell you, and we had talked about this a little bit in the Discord, mostly between Kyrie and I, a week or two ago. My initial impression of all this, I thought, okay, well, I'm probably going to be a notch lexical and a notch linear, and that would put me in, like, understanding territory. And I'm still, I don't know, nothing has made me feel more confident about that or really made me want to change my mind. So that's kind of the tentative zone.
Hold on,
I'm hanging out in.
I didn't pick that up at all. Can you like? I'm sorry.
No. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me your thoughts.
Okay, here's what I'm gonna do.
Diagnose me.
Yeah, here's what
Yeah,
we're
that's
gonna
what
do.
I'm
All
wanting
right.
to do one
Oh
too.
wait.
Diagnosing Alex.
I don't know. That kind of fits. That's like, I would think. I always thought you were more lexical than me, which is funny because you thought the opposite. Which might just be like we got a bunch of arguments and it was always over semantics.
Well, no, I mean, well, you and I are we focus on ironing out the semantics of the things we talk about, which a lot of people do not care to do. And that's, that can lead to conflict in conversations when you're focused on semantics and they're not. And they're doing I wish there was a word for it, the teasing thing, the non-literal communication. And so they're focused on what you're communicating non-literally. You're focused on the literal aspect. I see that with you a lot.
Yeah.
You and I get into conversations where we're focused on literal things, and we take care to iron out the semantics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I only do that because of fear of being perceived incorrectly, because I feel like when I try to communicate like generically, just people get the entirely wrong idea. So throughout life, I've developed the habit of just being extremely precise and literal, because I just can't effectively communicate the right thing if I'm not just extremely explicit, because people will just not get what I'm trying to say. If I
Yeah, the fact that you notice and care about that is what I thought being lexical on this chart was, but I don't know. Ryan, why were you surprised at my
no, I actually I was like dozing off, and I like didn't hear what you were saying.
Oh, I thought you disagreed with me. That'd be way more interesting.
I'm sorry.
So to reiterate, my initial impression of this was I thought I was going to be a notch lexical and a notch linear, which would put me hanging out around the understanding square. The more I got into it, the less confidence I had in this whole thing, and I still nothing that I've heard has made me more confident in that initial placement or made me rejected or more questioning of it. So my tentative question mark placing is in the understanding zone.
I think that seems like a good spot for you.
That's the impression I
But
had too.
yeah, sorry to disappoint.
Nah, bro, you're a new type.
Dang.
definitely
Your
not
shadow
that.
already in the fourth.
New type hype.
Definitely not.
That was interesting. That when we were getting into this in Discord, that Kyrie, you said you thought I might be there even before I did. So I'm gonna try and pull that part of the conversation up again.
I was thinking between quick-witted and understanding, because I don't think you're like super linear. I don't know. Like I don't think you're super lateral either. I just don't think you're like.
Yeah, I would rather be in the center of those two. And again, my confusion with linear lateral is I don't know at what point I'm just bad at focusing on things in an ADD type way versus being a lateral thinker, and it's hard for me to tell the difference. But
I mean, I'm heavily lateral,
I just saw like all the.
but I also just have terrible ADD.
So I saw all the explanations of like the lateral thing. I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. So basically, the thing for me is I actually don't know what linear is, but all the people that described lateral, I was like, yeah, that seems like. So I can't really. I'm like okay, I can fit with lateral, except for the ADD thing where it's like I can definitely focus. That's just like you just focus, like you just like okay, don't do the other thing.
Whatever
That's like
that's
discipline. Like that's not. But
I think we said earlier in the very beginning of this, someone said that lateral was like you understand things by relating them to other things, and that's like the most useful way of thinking about this that I've heard. I pulled up our original conversation between Kyrie and I, and you said you thought I would be in the technician, quick-witted, contemplative understanding area, which is exactly what we've just been saying on the lexical side and in the middle of linear lateral. So yeah, that's what I'm working with, I guess.
Yep. You can
Yeah.
always
Cool.
change it if you change your mind.
I think I might put you slightly more into the quick-witted, but
Sure, why not? The more squares it overlaps, I like that, because then I have more fluidity and flexibility, and I don't have to commit to a thing. So that's cool.
You're just gonna make the JPEG bigger so it covers more area.
yeah.
So it covers the whole damn thing.
Yeah, there you go.
Wait, what if you like overlap the sides and you're like fried egg just dangling off the plate? And then it like touches something, and you don't want to eat that dangling egg off the side of the chart.
Dude, I'll eat a dangling.
I think if
egg
you go off the edge
floor.
of the chart, you become non-functional.
No, but like,
I think my heat map is gonna. Ooh, let me make a really shitty heat map real quick. Keep talking.
wait, we should get a fried egg and like put it on the map, and like that's the heat map, and like the yolk is like where your center is.
literally print out the thing on a physical piece of paper and crack an egg.
Dude, this is how you do
All
like
this
your
stuff.
Rorschach test for your neurotype. You just crack an egg on top of a neurotyping chart and you see where like it splatters.
You have to cook it though. You have to cook it. That's like important. And you make
because depending on how you cook it is how it's gonna fall.
like a flat square skillet where the egg's gonna dangle off the side somewhere. That's important. So you have like some part of your brain is flooding off of the chart in one of the directions.
No, here you get one try. You crack an egg, wherever it goes, however it lands, that's your heat map. That is the empirical, scientifically rigorous way to find out your neurotype. It's like all the universe will do it for you.
It's like in Hunter.
This sounds like actual black magic.
You're gonna just like produce your aura through a cup of water, and depending on that, it's gonna be your map. Oh man,
that's like one of the shows where it's like more than 100 episodes. Never gonna watch it.
So like half of it is one arc. So you can watch like most of it, but it's like a sick arc, so you should watch the last.
I say that when I'm gonna watch 5 seasons of this show. That's like basically the same shit every episode, but it's
Hunter
awesome. So
is worth. Actually, I don't know. I keep saying like the Chimera arc is the worst and the best arc, and I'm not sure if Hunter x Hunter was the best or the worst thing I've ever sat through. I just don't know.
That arc is like a lexical brained arc, though.
Yeah, that's why.
It described everything in
Yeah,
anal
that's
detail.
just
There's so many things going at the same
like
time.
couldn't
It's
keep up with.
Explicit.
Everyone says that the Chimera arc is like the best one, and I just like didn't. It just didn't do anything for me. I actually stopped watching it there because I was like, too much politic shit.
See,
for my
it's all
dumb-
the payoff at the end.
right.
Yes, that makes it so worth it.
So like
I couldn't
go for
imagine
it.
watching it week to week, so I'm grateful that when I watched
There we
it, the
go.
show was over.
That is the best heat map.
Imagine watching
That's-
the Endless 8 on the week.
Oh, I wish I could access the 4chan lyrics back then.
Man, I fucking hated Haruhi. I like just her character. She's like such trash. I just hate the show.
I remember watching it
Like,
and I was like, that was okay, I guess. I don't know why people make such a big deal out of it, though.
So does the media you like? So like I think it was stated at some point that the media you like does not necessarily indicate your place on the chart.
I don't
I
think
wouldn't
it
think
does.
it should.
Yeah.
Nah.
No, not at all.
Because you can
Nah,
like the same thing for different reasons, etc., etc.
We're all talking about Hunter x Hunter.
Like, I feel like you can place any given show or piece of media on the chart somewhere, but you may enjoy it because it aligns with your own personal neurotype, or you might enjoy it because it's completely different. You
Like,
get something.
Well, people can enjoy them in
out of it.
different ways as well.
Exactly.
Like
I
Gurren
like Hunter
Lagann.
x Hunter. I like Hunter x Hunter because Gurren Lagann's another example. Is like I literally just like watching like the hype of like everything. Like, oh yeah, cool robot now in space
Yeah.
and then bigger
Oh,
space.
yeah.
But
And-
then
but,
you
like-
get like
But like I don't give a
and he's
fuck.
like-
Yeah, Nate's like blah, blah, whatever. I don't fucking care.
I just
Oh,
like
oh yeah,
the
Gurren. Oh
incredibly
yeah, yeah.
lateral
Nate's Gurren Lagann thing. I'm like,
commentary.
yeah, I didn't get that. I like. Yeah, I don't know.
I like it when cute girls do cute things, personally. Hot take.
Oh, that's a hot
That's
take.
fair,
That's a
that's
real
fair.
hot take.
Yeah, I'm gonna get burned
Dab.
by that.
He hates action. That's a cool take.
Wait, are you for real?
Wait, are you saying I
yeah,
hate
didn't
action?
you say you said you hate action?
No, I have jokingly said before that the plot is my least favorite element of any show. That's not quite true, but I tend to very much enjoy slice of life. I tend to very much enjoy
Yeah,
the
I
characters
just enjoy
rather
characters.
than the plot. I can
having
absolutely
conversations with
enjoy
each other.
plot-driven shows, but
But what about action?
yeah, a lot of my favorites are not plot-driven
Like just
necessarily.
like no take on action.
Action itself, not too interested usually.
Hmm.
Not usually.
Damn, bro, that's my cup of tea.
Well, I wonder if that's because a lot of times in shows, like, oh, these two characters are having a fight, and they rely so heavily on, oh, the fact that it's these two people and they have this history with each other and, plot. That's why it's interesting and important. Maybe that's why you're like, action, whatever.
No, see, that's again where it's like it's it's not defined by one thing. It's all interpretation, because I literally watch action shows for the explosions. I don't give a fuck about plot and like basically anything.
Yeah, I get that.
Fair enough.
This reminds me. Did anybody watch? Fucking oh god, I'm gonna have to remember. It was a really shit isekai where the guy gets reborn and he just knows everything about magic.
Kuso Mega.
No, not that.
The slime
No,
one?
not the slime. Oh,
Oh,
fuck.
which year did it air?
Sword
one
Art
where-
Online.
This
Wait,
this
he
was
wasn't reborn.
like 6 months ago, maybe.
6
The one where it's the
months
guy
ago.
that's like
Shield Bro.
a high level
Hero?
magician and he
Shield Bro.
like
No.
No, he
reincarnates himself.
he gets like reborn and he lives in like the forest with his grandpa, and his grandpa is like a hero from like the previous generation, and
I don't
he
remember
has like
that.
scientific knowledge from his previous life as an astronomer, and so
no
Oh, God.
idea.
oh god fucking damn it. Point
don't know.
being, the show was awful. It was terrible. Everything about it was shit except there was one scene. There was one tiny scene in every single episode where there was some really cool, huge explosion because he used some like sciencey shit, and I watched it just for that. I didn't.
So 8 out of
finish it,
10,
but
good explosions.
literally just because of the explosions.
It's like Megumi
Yeah, it
meme.
looks like you have to find
8 out
that
of
guy
10.
who did
Super,
the
yeah.
explosions. You know, like the one who drew the explosions?
Yeah. Oh, you mean like
Yeah, the animator.
So are you saying like okay, so I feel like almost art styles can get different levels of like, I mean, this comes to like realism and like realism versus surrealism more so than necessarily lexical impressionist. But like
XL Joshi. I don't know. I'm just trying to find this show you
should
said.
just find this show.
And I'm like going down, scrolling down Mouse Seasonal, and I just find this show. It's called XL Joshi. I'm like, what is this?
Gotta love them XLs.
Oh, man.
But this is interesting. The liking explosions, liking action for the spectacle. That sounds very impressionist.
Oh, it's Joshi,
Anybody
not Joshi.
Yeah.
It's boss.
agree,
not woman.
disagree?
I would agree.
I agree.
But
That's interesting.
again, if you could, that doesn't imply anything because you could be lexical and enjoy, like, not necessarily you, Ryan, but like in general, if you could be lexical and still enjoy,
Well, yeah.
so, like the impressionistic aspect of explosions, or you
Sure,
can
but
be, like,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. But what is like the lateral impression, what is like the lateral idea of an explosion or lexicals or sorry.
Well, you could be or what's his name? Not Quentin Tarantino, Michael Bay, and you could be. I want to make the best explosion movies with the best explosions, so I'm gonna learn about all the CGI programs that make the best explosions, I guess, and take like a very mechanical view of creating them.
Yeah.
I guess that would be a
Or-
lexical way to enjoy the spectacle of
or it's
action,
like-
is getting into the technical.
Michael Bay, pure
it's
instinct.
It's like
fucking
Dr.
fucking
Stone.
Kenjin Omago, wise man's grandchild.
Oh god. So like
But yeah.
you can be into like in Dr. Stone, for example, they're like a science-y show. So like whenever they do some kind of like they ignite gunpowder, spoiler alert, and they're like I feel like in that situation you can be like, oh yes, I'm really into this because you're explaining all the processes that go into like making this.
Yeah, like the
explosion.
lexical part would be like, explaining how they put it together and mixed it up and did all that.
But this
and then
is
the
al-
impressionist part is just kaboom.
But like for Konosuba, it could be also be like, oh yeah, I'm into all like the mana systems and like the like JRPG aspect
Well, now
of
I'm
like the explosion. I don't know.
I'm starting to
Did Konosuba have a like fleshed out mana
Not
system?
fleshed out. It's just implied. To
Not
be there.
really, but
You can make it
It's
up yourself
there.
and then get into it in a lexical way.
Well,
Yeah.
now I'm starting to think about how, like, okay, so I do generally believe that no piece of art is like strictly, one side of the spectrum,
I think that's true.
and can be enjoyed by anyone on the graph. But
agree.
I also
Yeah.
think that like there are definitely things that appeal to more specifically like for me, for example, I like again like I like the video games that I prefer have no plot. I want mostly like my favorite games are things where I just get to like shoot stuff and like beat the shit out
like
of people.
that body feel, that just like, yeah.
Yeah. I want to
crunch.
be the guy on the street and and then there's like a
I don't know. Maybe this sort of heat map where I'm just like anywhere up there.
You're a hot dog.
I'm a hot dog.
Yeah, with the when I said like in the enjoying the spectacle of an action shot, explosions or whatever as being an impressionistic thing, I didn't mean that as a diagnostic tool. Oh, if you like that, you're impressionistic. But the sort of
work
the
itself.
most common way of enjoying that, maybe the way that is meant to be enjoyed typically on the part of the creator,
Yeah.
is an impressionistic type of enjoyment.
Yeah, right.
Not necessarily, but yeah. And I definitely think enjoying art, that was what I mentioned before about like moving around the chart certain times. I'm like, if I try to analyze this or explain it, it's just going to ruin it. So I'm not going to. Enjoying art is definitely a great venue for moving around the chart.
This also influenced me
Yeah,
to put
most
myself
definitely.
in Fascinator because I'm not like the kind of person that needs to like explains like this show like why this is good because it uses the colors over here that reflect. It's like I'm just like, ooh, look at this. That's like, yeah.
I mean, I'm not so the Fascinator thing that definitely like strikes a bell with me because you like my initial impression of you like when we got like B-dubs and then you fucking for the next like 20 minutes we're trying to like calculate the proper tip in your brain.
Oh, that
the
was
tip,
like
like,
that's
the
just
payout
because of
tip.
habit. I always did that, and then I fucking messed it up, and I was like pissed off. So I was like, okay, I have to recalculate it.
Okay, but that moment like led to my understanding of you and like that was a fascinating moment as I would say.
I don't know, like
It doesn't sound lateral or
that's just like a thing that somebody does. It's like why that's just like a something. I don't know.
I get it.
I could.
The naming of
yeah, I
that
don't-
square is something that can.
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about the words. I'm just
I could
saying like
nitpick about.
being more impressionistic was like how I consume media. I'm not like trying to.
Yeah, but this anecdote he just told about calculating the tip, that doesn't sound lateral.
That's why-
that doesn't sound lateral or
That's what I'm
That's
saying. It's
why
just
I-
nothing.
impressionistic.
Right. No, I know. I think the words do like they don't necessarily help in entirely.
Oh yeah, you're supposed
Maybe
to
they
ignore them.
could
I would
be
thought.
better. Well,
Yeah, I think the
don't know
whole
if you're
reason
supposed to-
that they're there is just to help with the meme. People go in like, oh, personality test. Let's go have
Yeah,
a look at
that's
it.
how-
And
Well,
they,
then again,
like
though,
just
like
surface level catch people's attention. Which category are you? But then when you start breaking it down and really talking about it, you can just ignore that and look at
That's how
the
you
two
follow
axes.
them in.
Yeah, that's
well,
how
I think when I like, regardless of how I approach it, I find myself in the same area, and I think that area, like the words within that area, also resonate with me. So I don't think it's like entirely like foo-foo, but I think like maybe for
Well, not
some
entirely,
people
but-
it doesn't quite fit.
But why? Let me make sure I got this straight. That story you just told was about trying to calculate a restaurant tip in his head. Is that right?
Right.
And having that happen made you think that he was fairly impressionist and fairly lateral.
It just made me think like, wow, this dude's like, he's really not giving up. It did. I wasn't like, yeah, it's very like, you know.
No, yeah, I know, but do you associate that moment with that place on the chart? Because that doesn't
Yeah,
make sense.
no,
to me,
yeah.
So
I
how is that lateral or
Yeah, I don't
impressionist?
think it has anything to do with anything.
no. Well, okay, no, it's not. That's okay. So here's the thing, right? I'm bad, and
Aw.
no, that's not
You're
what I
good.
meant. That's not what I meant. Okay, I think that
Alexi's win another one.
Okay,
Donkey
all right. Let me explain myself. So that's where I'm getting caught up. Is I don't think it like I guess it doesn't really the placement itself doesn't work. I literally was just like latching onto the word. That's it.
See,
Okay,
I was
that's
just
what I
latching
thought.
onto
That's
the
what I
word
thought.
fascinator, which may not be the right like actual placement.
That word might be the most contentious one because you'd think fascinators would be linear, regardless of where they
I
are.
don't feel that way.
no.
If you're fascinated with something, I would think so.
Yeah, I think the words like ruin the chart.
I feel
Just give me a
constantly
Yeah, I
break.
don't think you
fascinated
should
by how
consider
divergent
that.
the entire world is.
So, okay,
No,
okay.
the way that I look at the fascinator is that it's not like that they are necessarily fascinated by things, but that they fascinate other people with their like understanding of things.
Look, at the end of the day, nobody knows what the fuck their neurotype is. The chart makes no sense. Maybe
Yes,
Digital
I
watch
agree.
this and he can neurotype us for us,
This is-
okay?
Yep.
God.
It's all fake, right? I won you over.
This is the inherent nature of
I'm-
the chart, though.
Yeah, I thought it was
So,
going to be
like-
this anyway, because like once I watched the video where he tried to start explain the stuff even more, it's like everything I thought was like, nope, that's okay. Now I'm more
Yep.
confused.
Well, and an event. Okay. See, like Ryan's describing an event that happened, and the use of the chart is to be able to categorize that thing for you into these categories of like lateral, linear, lexical, impressionless. So like in reality, the interpretation of it could stem like into a bunch of different categories. But I mean that's the whole nature of like everything basically, is that there's no perfect like our means of communication is imperfect. We can't beam thoughts into each other's head. So we have to come up with all these stopgap solutions to be able to communicate how we ourselves are thinking
Seems
about
like a very lateral and impressionist thing to say.
Indeed.
Whoever said a
Right.
moment ago that fascinators were named because they fascinate other people, not because they tend to get fascinated in things, you are correct about that. I have the script from Digi's video, from the first video. He has the text post linked. And he did actually say that. I'm looking at it right now. Because their logic is so opaque to outside observers, others tend to develop a certain fascination with the characters of this type, for better or worse.
Yeah.
So that clears up why that
I
category
see-
is
I
named the
see
way
how
it is.
that
Right.
for
That's
me.
that's what I was trying to. But yeah, that.
Is my logic opaque? I don't know. I'm trying to be clear.
Well, I don't know if
You
it's.
don't make any
No, I don't
fucking
think
sense,
it's-
Barton.
Oh, that's,
I haven't been able to understand anybody this whole podcast.
yeah,
Come
that's
on.
how it should go.
Come on.
Because
If
we're
we were
different
all just fucking
neurotypes.
Lexis, then the world would make sense, okay? Die, impression.
But the
die.
world typically does not make sense. Unless you burn
But if we
people.
pretend it makes sense, it will.
Yes,
Communism now.
yes, because we're human.
Wait, so we've got fried egg, boobs, fidget spinner,
Yeah.
hot dog.
Yes.
So-
I'm like an upside down pyramid then on my heat map.
So
Interesting. Yeah,
Well-
the heat maps.
yeah, I
got
gotta
fun
create
playing
my
with that.
own heat map.
I should open up a real image editor. and
wait, is there
try
like
to figure it
a
out.
poached egged fidget spinner? Make like a
Yep.
Probably.
a fidget
by
spinner
people exchange.
shape like
If there's not, I bet you can design and make one on some
And so you-
Spreadshirt-esque fidget spinner site.
no, not you need the actual device. It's a physical device. Like you can both poach eggs.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm sure that exists. That's gotta exist.
Although it'd be kind of big for a fidget spinner, like egg size spinner.
Not if it's like a small egg.
Well, I googled egg fidget spinner, and the first thing to come up is someone made a fidget spinner out of eggs. As in, there's
Post
a
it,
bearing
post
in
it.
the
I
center.
must
We
see
need a
this.
link.
It's a YouTube thumbnail. So I'll post the thumbnail and I'll link to it. But I'm describing it as I'm getting the image. They attached eggs to a bearing thing in the center. And so the eggs are like the 3 points. Here comes the
Okay.
image.
Does anybody else have anything constructive to say?
Oh. Oh god.
Yeah. As we're
Oh.
winding
This is
this
getting
down,
out of hand.
and
This is like
as we're going off topic, I do have one thing that I don't think we should delve into this now, considering how long we've been going. But I'll float the idea if anyone wants to talk about it later. If anyone actually listens to this and they want to fight with me in the comments about it, please do. But one thing
Please
that we
watch
didn't
the
talk
fight.
about too much was this came up with my piano example, but how this chart might apply to learning how to do things, like not learning how to think, not learning how to communicate, but learning how to do like physical, tactile things. That's a really, really interesting topic to me. Fighting games, I played Melee a lot. That's out of all the things I've done ever in my life, playing Melee was the thing that gave me the most insight into the way people think. So I like to apply these ideas to that. There's a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, which became kind of popular / a meme in fighting game communities. One of the tenets of that book was this guy was coaching tennis, and he found that one of the best ways to teach his students was to just have them watch him do things. So if you're trying to teach someone to serve, he would have them watch him serve like several times in a row, and that would like level up their square one learning how to serve. I think there's some things you could dive into there with how you can learn things in an impressionistic way when you're learning how to do them, so there's no need to articulate them, but you can also employ articulating them as a strategy too. There's a whole thing to go into there. It's too late now. I'm too burnt out. I don't want to talk about it on this podcast, but I just wanted to float the idea. And that taps me out on the topic. Thank you.
All right. Well, does anyone else have any final things to say?
No.
One real quick thing. It turns out there is indeed an epic rap battle
Yep,
with
I
Sigmund
know.
Freud.
It was.
Yeah, as
Yeah, it's
expected.
against Mother Teresa
That's
Yes,
what I was
for
thinking
some
of.
reason. I mean, that's less Freud as a psychologist and more of him as like... Oh, it's him as a psychologist, not him as a theorist. I'll say that.
As a
I
fucking
guess.
epic rapper.
How about as a cokehead?
Oh, for
Top
sure.
tier.
Yeah. So
All right,
I
well,
think
I guess that is that,
yeah,
folks.
I think
Yeah.
there's still gonna be more discussion about neurotypes. I myself need to have a whole day spent on going down this rabbit hole. I think I would be able to have more thoughts about my position as well as presenting a heat map of my own, because I think I'm not just like on my exact position. I have my moments of being an overseer or being in the background, but offering my own concise comments. But I also have my moments of quick-wittedness. That's where I'm the funniest, apparently. That's what other people told me in my life. So, yeah, I think that's about it for me.
Yeah, there will be many more neurotypes to come for many more years.
Yes.
Thank you, Digi.
Thank you, Digi. You once again saved our lives.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I don't know.
I think
I
we
wouldn't
can
go that far, but it's definitely been an interesting thought experiment for sure.
We can all like share. I mean, there's gonna be stuff on screen, but we can all share our images in the description if we have like updated them or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all for today, folks.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Stay cool.
Bye.
Next time.